So I'm going to sentence him to 80 years in the prison, give him credit for any time served. There is a $0 fine.
Tay-K's just learned his new release date, and it's starting to look like he ain't making it out the four walls of prison. But how did he go from being on top of the world to serving a rap for double homicide? Let's dive in and find out. Bro was built different. Bro, real talk. Pull up the Texas Department of Criminal Justice website right now. Like, actually go look, because sitting right there in a government database, plain as day, no clickbait, no exaggeration, no allegedly attached to it, is a release date that reads August 8th, 2099. Not a typo, not a glitch in the system. 2099, the year 2099, a date so far out there that it ain't even a real concept to most of us. It's the kind of year you see in a dystopian movie trailer, not on a real human being's prison record. And yet there it is, government stamped, database confirmed, absolutely not moving. That record belongs to Tamar Trayvon McIntyre, age 25. The whole world called him Tay-K. And if you were online back in 2017, if you remember the wave, if you remember the hashtag, if you remember half the rap game posting those lyrics like it was a flex, then you already know how this story started. But knowing it started wild, and knowing why it started, how it started, what was already broken before a single song got recorded or a single charge got filed, that's a completely different conversation. And that's the conversation we're having today, because this ain't just a rapper caught a case and fell off story. This goes way deeper than that. This is about a kid who was already in survival mode before he ever touched a microphone. A kid who had never really been given a reason to believe the system, any system, was built to protect him. A kid who looked around at what his life had handed him and made choices that one by one stacked on top of each other like blocks that only fall in one direction. And when that stack finally collapsed, it collapsed on everyone around him, including people who had nothing to do with any of it. So let's go all the way back before the song, before the wanted poster, before the trial. Let's go back to where Tamar McIntyre actually came from. Tamar Trayvon McIntyre was born June 16th, 2000, right at the turn of the millennium in a country that was popping bottles about a new era. But ain't nobody in his household was popping bottles. His pops was locked up during Tamar's most critical years. The years when a young boy is literally figuring out what the world is, what it expects from him, what safety even feels like. And rather than someone stepping in to hold things together, Child Protective Services came in and pulled both Tamar and his older sister, Kayla Beverly, out of home. Multiple foster homes, multiple cities. They even spent time out in Las Vegas, far from anything that resembled stability or roots. Then the father got out. He got custody back. The family landed in Arlington, Texas. And if you thought that reunion was a part of the story where things finally turn around, bruh, it wasn't. During Tay-K's 2025 murder trial, Kayla Beverly got on the stand and painted a picture of what life looked like in that household. Their father allegedly beat them with a two-core for something as minor as bad grades. And this one's genuinely hard even process, she described how he once tied a young Tamar to an ironing board when he cried because he thought the boy was being overdramatic. Both parents were painted throughout the trial as MIA or flat out inadequate. A whole household shaped by substance abuse, mental illness, and criminality running through the bloodline. Defense experts stood up in court and called a perfect storm. And honestly, that's not even a reach. Now, look, and we gotta say this clearly because some of y'all are already typing in the comments. None of that background is a pass for what came after. None of it brings anybody back. None of it unfiles any charges. But if you want to actually understand how a human being ends up on a trajectory, like Tay-K's, you don't get to skip this part. The soil matters. What was planted in that soil matters. And what was growing in Tamar McIntyre long before anybody cared about his SoundCloud page was something that nobody would sense should have been surprised eventually went sideways. Tamar McIntyre was 15 years old, fresh off the first day of New Year, 2016, when the first documented violent incident entered his orbit. He was riding as a passenger in a car in Denton, Texas, with his associate, Eric Santana Sage Johnson, shot and killed University of North Texas student Sarah Muchlechner following an altercation that allegedly started over sexual harassment by people in that same vehicle. No cap, Tamar wasn't the shooter. He wasn't charged. He wasn't even required to testify. Johnson ended up convicted of murder and sentenced to 44 years. And Tamar walked away clean, at least in the eyes of the law. But think about what just happened. This 15-year-old kid, already shaped by years of trauma and instability, just sat in a car where a woman got killed by one of his guys. And instead of that being the moment where he zoomed out and said, "I need to move different," he stayed in the same world. Same circles, same energy, same direction. The red flags were flying. He just wasn't reading them. 6 months later, Tamar McIntyre is 16 years old. And on the night of July 26, 2016 in Mansfield, Texas, the choices and the crew and the chaos that had been building around him for years finally hit a wall. And it wasn't a wall anybody was walking away from clean. Prosecutors said McIntyre orchestrated a home invasion targeting a 17-year-old named Zachary Belotti. The play was to run up on him for his drugs and money. The whole operation was laid out. Accomplices Megan Hull and Ariana Barrett were on the door duty, luring B.O. to open up. McIntyre and co-defendants Letharian Merritt, Sean Robinson, Jalen Bell, and a juvenile came through. Tay-K later admitted in a 2.5-hour recorded interrogation that his job was to search the house for the drugs. He wasn't supposed to be the trigger man. That was a plan. But here's the thing about plans made by teenagers running up in somebody's house. They don't survive contact with reality. During the chaos of that invasion, Merritt shot and killed 21-year-old Ethan Walker, a father of a young daughter, standing there with his hands up in the air. Another resident caught a bullet. 2. 7 people got charged with capital murder. And then, one by one, like a line of dominoes, everybody started folding. Ariana Parrott, 25 years for aggravated robbery. Megan Holt, 20 years in exchange for testifying. Sean Robinson, 40 years for murder. Jalen Bell, 30 years. The juvenile, 20 years. Merritt, the actual shooter, got capital murder in 2018 and caught life without parole. Every single person in that house that night was cooperating. Every last one of them took a deal. Every deal they took left TK more exposed than the day before. Nobody was riding for him. The streets was talking, and they was talking to the DA. The streets knew it was coming. On Vlad TV, when people were first processing the situation, somebody who'd been through the system themselves laid it out exactly. TK is up on murder charges, and everyone seems to be turning against him. So like the female that was one of his co-defendants. She had just taken 25 years over a 45-year capital murder bid, which means she was going to get on that stand and sing everything she knew. And when someone who'd been on death row themselves got asked directly how bad it was looking for TK at that point, there was no sugarcoating it. But as of right now with them two testifying, he looking like he's going to be sunk because you know them powerful witnesses. Sunk, that's the word. And at this point, the prosecution hadn't even gotten to the second murder case yet. The walls were closing in from every direction. So what did Tamar McIntyre do? He did what the song he was about to record told you he did. He ran. While all this legal heat was building up around the Mansfield case, McIntyre had been placed on house arrest in early 2017, pending a certification hearing to decide whether he'd be tried as an adult. Ankle monitor on, lawyers in his corner. A theoretical pathway through the courts still technically open. And on March 27, 2017, he cut that ankle monitor off and dipped gone. But here's where it crosses from reckless into genuinely unbelievable. Bro announced it on social media to the entire internet. He posted this house arrest 12. They can have 2 catch me on hood. A 16-year-old on the hook for a capital murder case, wanted by law enforcement. And he's out here posting about it like it's a W. Like cutting your ankle bracelet while facing murder charges is something you tweet about. That's not gangster. That's not cold. That's a kid with no real understanding of consequences. Or a kid so deep in survival mode that he genuinely didn't care what came next. Either way, what came next was bad. Really, really bad. And it's the subject of part 2. Two bodies, one banger, and trials. When Tamar McIntyre cut that monitor and dipped into the wind, he didn't vanish. He didn't go quiet. He didn't pull up somewhere out the way and lay low until things cooled down. That ain't what happened. What actually happened is that a 16-year-old fugitive wanted for a capital murder case decided to move through Texas like he was invincible, catching another body in the process, hopping to New Jersey, recording a song about the whole thing, and then getting locked up the same day the song dropped. I know that sounds like I'm exaggerating for the plot. I promise you I'm not. Somewhere between cutting that ankle bracelet and getting caught up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, Tamar McIntyre made his way to San Antonio. And on the afternoon of April 23rd, 2017, McIntyre and Jalen Bell pulled up on 23-year-old photographer Mark Anthony Salivar in a Chick-fil-A parking lot and attempted to rob him for his camera equipment. Surveillance cameras caught the whole thing on tape. Salivar wasn't going out without a fight. He jumped on the hood of their SUV. McIntyre shot him once. Mark Anthony Salivar died. 23 years old, a creative professional, somebody out here using his camera to build a career, gone. Over some equipment, not over a beef, not over territory, over a lick that probably wasn't going to net them more than a couple thousand on a good day, if that. And when people were talking about this years later, Tony O said exactly what needed to be said. Ran. Well, whatever it was another dude. It was a 23-year-old. It was a senseless murder to two senseless murders over camera equipment and stuff like that. Senseless. That's the only word for it. Tay-K wasn't beefing with Mark Salivar. Mark Salivar wasn't part of any story. He was just in the wrong parking lot on the wrong afternoon when somebody decided his camera was worth taking. And now his name is permanently tied to one of the most talked about criminal cases in hip-hop history. Not because of anything he did, but because of what was done to him. McIntyre kept moving. He allegedly ran up on 65-year-old Oni Skip Pepe at gunpoint in Arlington's Cravens Park on May 25, 2017, knocked a man unconscious during a robbery. This was a teenager on a full fugitive run, leaving a trail across Texas, touching people whose only crime was existing in his path. And through all of it, through every robbery, every state line crossed, every day the feds were getting closer, bro was recording music. The internet went absolutely feral. The free Tay-K hashtag went up immediately and spread across every platform. The track hit the Billboard Hot 100 at number 70 and peaked at number 44. Travis Scott, Kodak Black, Lil Yachty, Meek Mill Designer, they were all posting the lyrics, giving it the cosign. The music video had him standing next to his own wanted poster, like it was a flex. Tyga and Rico Nasty dropped remixes. His management pushed the Santana World mixtape out from Tarrant County Jail, and it entered the Billboard 200. The whole culture was locked in. The song has since crossed 255 million YouTube views and over 400 million Spotify streams. Those are numbers that most artists spend entire careers chasing. And here's what makes all of that almost tragically poetic, if you want to call it that. The same song that made him famous was going to get played back to a jury during his sentencing and used as evidence of flight from justice and zero remorse. The record that launched a career was also a key piece of the prosecution's case. Lord Jamar and the homie broke it down on Vlad TV at the time. Well, unlike Meek Mill, Tay-K had a very dissimilar experience in court because the vibe was everybody was watching this like it might go. Different, like maybe the wave could carry him through somehow. And then the verdict landed, and it was a whole different energy. The race is over. 55 years. Ouch. And he has another murder trial to go. 55 years for the first case, and another murder trial still incoming. The wave couldn't carry him through none of it. Certified to be tried as an adult, Tay-K's Tarrant County proceedings kicked off July 15, 2019. He went in and immediately pleaded guilty on the 2 robbery counts, but he contested the murder charge, arguing he didn't anticipate the shooting, wasn't the one who pulled the trigger, and that Ethan. Walker's death shouldn't fall on him legally. The counter-argument the prosecution offered was Texas's law of parties, which essentially says that if you go into a criminal situation with a crew and somebody ends up dead, everybody present is on the hook for that death. The jury convicted him of murder on July 19, 2019. During sentencing, prosecutors played portions of the race in the courtroom, framing the song's lyrics as direct evidence that he had consciously fled and had no remorse. Imagine being an artist and watching your own music get used to bury you in your own sentencing hearing. That's a specific kind of irony that doesn't feel ironic at all. It feels like the universe closing a loop. July 23rd, 2019, 55 years for murder. Additional concurrent terms on the robberies. A $21,000 fine on top of all of it. Parole eligibility set at roughly 28 years served. Social media tried to make sense of it. Some people calling it sad, some calling it inevitable, some saying it was wasted potential, some saying the energy they had given the race in 2017 hadn't really accounted for what the charges actually were. The Dallas hip-hop scene largely went quiet. The freak wave started to feel a lot less like a movement, and a lot more like a moment that had passed. But here's the thing, they hadn't even gotten to Beggs County yet. The second trial was still out there waiting. After getting indicted on capital murder charges in Bigard County back in November 2019, McIntyre waited years for the second trial. In February 2024, he turned down a plea deal, chose to run it back in court. The Bexar County trial opened April 1st, 2025 in the 187th District Court in front of Judge Stephanie Boyd. 7 days. The whole trial was 7 days. And every single one of those days brought receipts. The prosecution had surveillance footage of the actual shooting. They had co-defendant testimony. They had McIntyre's ex-girlfriend, Joanna Reyes, the girl he'd been living with at the time of the San Antonio murder, testifying against him on the stand, describing her role in the events leading up to it, the person he was most intimate with, the person he'd been laying his head with every night. She was a witness for the prosecution. That's not just a legal problem. That's a gut punch. Because McIntyre was 16 at the time of the San Antonio crime. Texas law prevented the jury from going for automatic life without parole or the death penalty. Sentencing range was 5 to 99 years or life. The jury convicted him of murder on April 14th, 2025. And on April 15th, 2025, they handed down 80 years, no fine. And Judge Boyd told him directly before he was taken out of that courtroom, I do realize that while this is a lot of time, you're still alive. You can still better yourself. His family reacted hard enough in the courtroom that security had to remove them. Beggs County DA Joe Gonzalez stepped to the podium and made clear that celebrity doesn't change what accountability looks like in a Texas court and on the internet. The reaction was exactly what you'd expect. Comments saying, 80 years, bro, what? And cooked and memes about how the race has ended. On Vlad TV, Vlad laid it out plain when talking to Tony Yao. Tay-K just stood a trial for a second murder case. Found guilty again. Yeah, they gave him 80, right? 80 years. The 80-year Bexar County sentence was set to run concurrent with the existing 55-year Tarrant County bid, meaning the longer sentence is running the show. 2 trials, 2 murder convictions, 5 total convictions, including the robberies, and projected release date that now read August 8th, 2099. The race hadn't just ended. Bro had lapped himself going in the wrong direction and ended up in a completely different decade. The 2099 sentence 8. So, here's a number that's been going crazy viral on the timeline. Before you assume this is one of those situations where social media is running with something that's half accurate, no, this one's verified. Pull up the TDCJ inmate search. Type in TDCJ number 02559115, and right there on the screen in the same boring government font they use for everything. You'll see it. 26,807. That's approximately how many days are left on Tay-K's sentence as of when these numbers started hitting the timeline in early 2026. 26, 87 days for a 25-year-old. Let that marinate. Tamar McIntyre, EDCJ number 02559115, is housed at the John B. County Unit in Kins County, Texas. Maximum sentence date, August 8th, 2099. His projected release date also August 8th, 2099. His parole eligibility date, August 7th, 2049. That's the earliest possible morning anyone could even consider cutting him loose. By then, he'd be approximately 49 years old. He'll have done his entire 20s, his entire 30s, and his entire 40s, every single year of what most people consider their prime behind the walls of a Texas maximum security prison. And that's if everything breaks perfectly in his favor at the first possible parole review. It won't. Now that the numbers are telling the truth, and they are, the Texas Board of Pardons imperils Way's offense. Severity, criminal history, how you've been moving inside, victim family input, and real evidence of rehabilitation. Stack all of that against what Tay-K is bringing to that review board in 2049. 2 murder convictions, multiple aggravated robbery convictions with firearms involved, an on-record escape from house arrest, a hidden cell phone in his sock during detention, alleged gang formation inside the facility, and then tell me with a straight face that board is stamping his paperwork approved. Historical Texas parole data shows approval rates of 30 to 45% for violent offenders with multiple violent convictions, typically producing repeated denials, and set off of up to 5 to 10 years per denial. That means if they deny him in 2049, they could push his next review all the way to 2054-2059. Each denial potentially another decade gone. And his own rap lyrics used against him in not one, but 2 separate murder trials are on record as evidence of a continued criminal mindset, which means even the art form that made him famous is working against him in the one room that matters most. The TDCJ record doesn't leave any room for spin. Inmate is not scheduled for release at this time. Full stop. The only thread left dangling is a legal one. After Bizarre County came down, defense attorney John Hunter filed a motion for new trial. Judge Boyd denied it on or around May 23, 2025, finding no prejudice from the alleged disclosure issues the defense raised. Then a notice of appeal was filed on May 21, 2025 in the Texas Fourth Court of Appeals. Case number 04250-324CR. As of March 2026, that appeal is still pending. No reversal, no new trial, no modification of the sentence on the books. The earlier appeals tied to the Tarrant County conviction also went nowhere in terms of actually changing his custody status. The appellate process is alive, but the likelihood of it flipping the outcome is slim to none based on what's been reported. As of March 20th, 2026, there are 0 credible reports indicating any viable path to early release. That door is open about a crack, and the wind isn't blowing that way. Now, let's get into something that doesn't get talked about enough in the comments and reaction videos. What this actually looks like from inside those walls. Because the memes about 2099 are funny to people who are on the outside scrolling. They're a lot less funny when you map out what Tamor's actual day-to-day existence has looked like since he was 17 years old. In August 2018, they found a hidden cell, phone in his sock at Tarrant County Jail. Got him thrown in solitary after allegations that he threatened staff and started wilding on his unit. In March 2019, he was accused of building a Crips-affiliated set inside the facility called Drug Rats, reportedly complete with written bylaws, no snitching, no stealing from members, the whole playbook. That led to further isolation off informant tips. Bro was out here trying to build infrastructure inside the county jail while facing a capital murder trial. That's the kind of behavior that follows you into every future parole hearing. An alleged message from him circulating around 2023 complained that the institution was literally treating me very bad, which tracks with someone who spent years cycling through solitary gang suspicion and constant surveillance. At one point after his arrest, he reportedly claimed to have swallowed pills and was hearing voices, which led to time in a psychiatric ward for evaluation. And during the 2025 sentencing, a forensic psychologist testified specifically about how the trauma of Tay-K's childhood, piled on top of years of isolation and confinement, creates compounding mental health risks of the type typically seen in long-term incarceration cases. Decades in a max security facility don't heal old wounds. They reopen them on a schedule. His sister Kayla took the stand during the punishment phase to try to humanize him for that jury. And she couldn't even get close enough to give him a hug in that courtroom because of the security restrictions in place. A family member had previously run his Twitter to relay that contact between them was strained and irregular. No children have ever been publicly reported. No current partner. No sustained intimate relationship documented anywhere since Joanna Reyes, the woman who eventually testified against him at his own murder trial. The only person we know he was close with romantically was someone the prosecution called to the stand. That's not just an L. That's the kind of L that compounds in silence year after year after year. Beginning incarceration before legal adulthood has permanently cut off every personal milestone most people walk through naturally in their 20s. Building a relationship on his own terms, raising kids, maintaining a real connection with family outside of visitation glass. None of it, his personal life, as TDCJ records and court documentation confirm, has been reduced to institutional existence at the Connolly unit with no realistic prospect of change before his 2049 parole review at the earliest. And even that's no sure thing. And then there's the catalog, because here's the part that somehow manages to hit different even in the middle of all of this. The music never stopped performing. It just stopped being something he could actually participate in. Santana World dropped from Tarrant County Jail in July 2017 and entered the Billboard 200 at number 128. The race alone is sitting at over 400 million Spotify streams, numbers that artists with full freedom and full access to every promotional tool in the game would kill for. And then in November 2025, 8 years after his last official drop, his team pushed out 3 vault singles, Coolin', Half Off, and Lay Low under an independent label. Coolin' alone pulled over 3 million streams in its debut weekend on Spotify, over 1 million in a weekend, while the man behind the music is sitting in a cell at the Connolly unit with approximately 2,687 days left on his government paperwork. He can't perform it. He can't promote it. He can't sit in a session and build on any of the momentum those numbers generated. He can't shoot a video, do a feature, go on a radio run, pop up at a festival, collaborate with anybody new, or have any meaningful hand in directing where the career goes. The 2025 drops are viewed by industry observers as the last likely output from existing vault material. Not a comeback arc, not a revival, just a final flicker of what was left in the chamber before the ammunition runs out. His team manages the catalog. His family maintains what little social media presence still exists. And Tamar McIntyre sits in a box and watches the streams rack up on music he recorded before he was old enough to legally vote, sign a contract, or rent a car. The career launched loud and crashed quiet. Everything that was supposed to come after the early buzz, the tours, the albums, the artist development, the real longevity, all of it got swallowed by a sentence that now stretches past the next century. Since the TDCJ 2099 date started circulating virally in early 2026 with posts calling it crazy, brutal, and no fairy tale comeback, the conversation on the timeline has been split in two. On one side, people still posting Hodge or free Tay-K still, people framing it as wasted potential, people treating it like a culture loss. On the other side, people pointing out plainly and correctly that 2 men are dead and multiple families have been permanently shattered, and that the ongoing glorification of the fugitive rapper narrative is doing those families a disservice every single day it persists. TikTok and YouTube reaction channels keep framing this as a cautionary tale. Young choices, permanent consequences. The 2017 hype as a before and after snapshot of exactly how fast things can go from viral to life sentence. And honestly, that's the right frame. Reddit threads and public commentary are increasingly cutting through nostalgia to remind people of the contrast between 2017 and 2026. The wave versus the reality of de facto life imprisonment. And when the conversation was happening in real time, when Vlad and Tony Yao were putting it all on the table, Yao ended up saying the thing that needed to be said out loud with no extra word around it. 2 people. That's it. That's the whole story underneath all the streams and the hashtags and the reaction videos and the memes. 2 people who were living their lives, minding their business, and ended up dead because somebody decided that what they had was worth taking. Ethan Walker, 21, a father, hands up. Mark Anthony Solivar, 23. Photographer on the hood of an SUV. Their families are still here. They didn't get to trend. They didn't get a Wikipedia page. They didn't get 400 million Spotify streams dedicated to their memory. And Tamar McIntyre. He's 25 years old. His parole eligibility is 2049. His maximum sentence date is 2099. He started serving before he was old enough to drive legally. He'll be approaching 50 before a parole board even has to take him seriously. And the gap between who he was, a kid with real talent, real charisma, real ability to move a crowd, and who he is now, a number in a database at the Connolly unit with 26,000 days still on the clock, is the whole moral of this story. No cap, the race is over. Bro been cooked since 2017. The papers just made it official in 2025. And now the only thing that's still running is the clock. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to watch another fascinating video like this, click on one of the boxes on your screen right now.